When a serious crime is committed and the police need all the help they can get, there's one group of people they turn to time after time: the expert witnesses.
Expert witnesses are the golden thread that runs through cases that every single conviction needs.
An extraordinary army of men and women with the expertise to reveal the hidden clues criminals have left behind.
There are so many important pieces of evidence: paint evidence, glass, fibre evidence.
They search harder and look deeper, using the very latest techniques.
If I can work out how old those insects are, that's going to give me the minimum time since death.
This is the inside story of how science helps solve some of the UK's most complex cases.
It really was becoming the last throw of the dice.
Nothing's going to bring her back, but she'd have the justice that she rightly deserved.
This is the story of the expert witness. Today, we delve into a 55-year-old murder mystery in the village of Beenham in Berkshire.
Although this is now sealed, within this bag is one of the plastic bags that were found on the floor of the barn. From my point of view, this is the raw material which enables me and my team to do our work.
And we take a trip around the world, analysing the tiny clues found on the body of murdered Leicester solicitor Veena Patel.
Just a couple of tufts of fibres leads you across the world to India, and then you go all the way back to the other side of the world to Jamaica.
It doesn't matter how old a case is, there's always a chance that the killers left something behind that which we might find now using our new techniques.
Beenham, Berkshire, 1966. 1 week after Yolande Waddington arrives in the village to start a job as a nanny, she's found dead. Police descend on the small village.
And how's the investigation going?
Very hard work has been put into this. The whole area is alive with policemen at the present time.
But the massive investigation never found Yolande's killer. And for over 40 years, the case remained unsolved. Then, in 2010, Thames Valley Police began a new inquiry, this time with the added help of DNA expert witness Roy Green.
It doesn't matter how old a case is, if the exhibits still exist or retained materials still exist, then we can play our part in trying to solve it.
The reinvestigation would be led by head of the Thames Valley Police Cold Case Unit, Pete Byrne.
Around about 10 o'clock or thereabouts, Yolande said that she wanted to go and post a letter. Went to the post box, and then having gone there, came to the pub just after 10 o'clock or thereabouts, bought a packet of cigarettes, and then left. And she didn't return, and obviously when she didn't return, she was reported missing.
Her body was discovered 2 days later, hidden near this barn. Yolande had 2 stab wounds to her chest. Neither was fatal. The pathologist confirmed the cause of death was strangulation.
So this is where the barn was in 1966. It's now gone, but it was just over there. Say, obviously something had happened within the barn. That's where Yolande's clothing was.
As well as clothing, police also found a knife, a comb, and blood-stained sacks.
This is good because it shows you the fertiliser sacks in situ. The blade of a broken knife that was found at the scene. He was stabbed, probably by this knife. A comb was also found. Just outside the barn, you can see the hay.
In the 1960s, forensic capability was limited, but identifications could be attempted using blood groups. Detectives believed blood found on the fertiliser sacks belonged to the killer and did their best to find a match.
Beenham's only a small village, but even so, they carried out a mass screen of all males in the village, and they tested 4,000 people.
While police waited on the results, their investigations suggested a possible suspect.
That's David Burgess in 1966, who was a 19-year-old man from Beenham. The evidence against David Burgess was the fact that he had been in the Six Bells at the time. Yolande was there. He was seen to leave shortly afterwards. The next day, he had scratches on his face, and he said he'd fallen into a bush on the way home because he was a bit drunk. He also volunteered to the police when they found a knife at the scene that he had lost a knife similar to that a few weeks previously.
Police were immediately suspicious, but the results of the blood sample Burgess had given did not match the blood group found on the fertiliser sacks. And then there were 2 more murders.
3 murders in 6 months. Similar murders, many people are saying. And the people in these houses, people who are peeping out from behind their curtains, are asking, when will this man be caught?
9-year-old Jeanette Wigmore and Jacqueline Williams had gone out on their bikes. They never came home.
Jeanette Wigmore's body was found in a disused gravel pit just behind me here, which is now the scene of an intensive police hunt. A little later on, 2 hours later on, the body of the other child was found.
It seems rather a coincidence, you know, within a mile of each other. 3 murders in 6 months, isn't it? Yes, I think no, it's definitely a local man.
Jeanette and Jacqueline had indeed been killed by a local man, David Burgess. He was tried and convicted, but he continued to deny Yolande's murder. And with a shortage of evidence, he was never tried. Now, 45 years later, Peter Byrne hoped modern science could help him uncover the truth. So he turned to forensic biologist and expert witness Roy Green to examine the original evidence.
You need to go back and check everything, even though something has been said to have been done or something has been said to have been tested. Has that been done properly?
So what we have here is the box of exhibits that were initially sent to the forensic scientists. From my point of view, this is the raw material which enables me and my team to do our work.
It was now up to the forensic scientists to go through this evidence in detail. Would Roy Green's team prove Burgess's guilt or find it was someone else entirely?
Solving old cases like this, it's a combination of things. Firstly, you know, there is new technology. DNA is available that wasn't available previously. But also you need to look back and say, well, has everything been done as it should have been done? The more you do, the more you realise that cases are solvable.
There were only a few pieces of evidence to work with. The knife, the comb, the blood-stained sack, and of particular interest, Yolande's headband.
That was an important item because Yolande always wore this headband, and when she was found, she wasn't wearing it, and it was in the barn.
Roy believed this key piece of evidence may have been overlooked by the original investigation.
When we looked at the original scientist's notes, it was described as grubby. It didn't really look grubby to me, it looked more like blood.
Blood offered the potential to find the killer's DNA. This was exactly the kind of new lead the cold case team was looking for. But for Roy, it presented a scientific question.
So our first challenge was, we knew that these bloodstains were 45 years old, and we didn't really know whether any DNA profiling would work. Well, first of all, you have to find the DNA, which we did with the bloodstain. Then you have to extract the DNA from the particular material it's in. You start off with 1 fragment, and by the end of the process, in theory, you'll have about 4 billion. And so you are amplifying up very tiny amounts of DNA until you have enough to be able to do something with them.
There was a problem, though. The samples were nearly half a century old.
Blood being a biological material, it can degrade, and what tends to happen is that parts of the profile are lost before other parts. In order to successfully have a case go through court, you need to be able to produce the best result you can with the strongest evidence that you can.
A partial profile wasn't going to be enough to prove a match. After Roy's initial excitement, it looked like the headband had been a false start. But he and his team did not give up. Instead, they turned to the next bloodstain exhibit and tried again.
The fertiliser bag, which had been examined, and in the notes it said they were crusty bloodstains. Well, they were still there, and we've zoomed in here. You can see them still there. There's still a bloodstain there. Some of the results that were obtained were mixtures. So that was a mixture of DNA from different people in there. And they found that on the fertiliser sack there was blood that couldn't have come from the victim.
Some of the DNA was from Yolande, but there was also a male profile, and this was sufficiently complete to try and match with the police database.
The result obtained from the fertiliser bag showed that the findings were at least 1 in a billion times more likely if the blood came from David Burgess rather than someone unrelated to him.
They had found a match. Pete Byrne finally had the evidence that David Burgess had been Yolande's killer all along.
When I was told, I wasn't surprised. Obviously, Burgess had been a suspect in the initial investigation. Any unresolved homicide won't be forgotten, and we will do all that we can to try and get a resolution.
Burgess had been in prison since 1967 for the murders of Jeanette Wigmore and Jacqueline Williams. In November 2011, he was brought in for questioning about Yolande. Police hoped if they pushed him about the unexplained scratches, he might reveal something to back up the DNA evidence.
Did you get those scratches because Yolande scratched your face?
I had nothing whatsoever to do with her death. I've told you that, and you won't believe it because I'm a liar, you said.
Burgess continued his denial, even when pressed about the knife.
We're saying the knife that you lost is identical, you say you lost, is identical to the knife that was used to murder Yolande Waddington. That's a coincidence, Sam, isn't it? Your missing knife is the same knife that was used. How many people in Veena had a knife similar? How many people? Are they all suspects, aren't they?
In the end, the interview revealed nothing new, but the DNA evidence was still strong. In 2012, after a 5-week trial, a jury found David Burgess guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Finally, Yolande's family had justice for their daughter.
Science was vital in solving this case. Solving a case this old brings an extra element of satisfaction, that you were finally able to bring closure to a victim's family. And it's part of the reason why I do the job.
She was a young 17-year-old girl, a whole life ahead of her, just starting out in life with a job, starting to earn some money for herself, and it's all taken away just like that.
After Burgess's conviction, Thames Valley Police received a letter from Yolande's father thanking them for their efforts to find her killer.
Dear Chief, let it not be said to have been a thankless task. To the lot of you who have been involved in the search for evidence leading to the jury's verdict of guilty at Reading Crown Court on Friday the 20th of July 2012, I say thank you. To the lot of you who have toiled a total of approaching 46 years seeking evidence, I say thank you. From Yolande's daddy, yours sincerely, William Waddington. Again, 46 years later, he was still her daddy. She was still his little girl, and she'd been taken away from him all those years ago.
It's amazing that a tiny thread of a few fibres can lead to all sorts of other evidence and may even crack the case for the investigators.
Leicester, 2009. Solicitor Veena Patel is found dead, and crime journalist Nick Britton is assigned to cover the story.
Concerns were first raised by Veena's daughter, Anisha, because she was due to go and meet her after work and she hadn't turned up. After a while, they became a little bit concerned, so Anisha and her father, Veena's husband, Surendra, went round to the office. And it was then that they made this gruesome and horrifying discovery. Veena was lying at the bottom of the stairs. She was in an unnatural position, and she was, quite clearly, no longer alive.
Detectives attended the scene. They're trained never to take anything at face value, so immediately had questions.
Had she fallen down the stairs and broken her neck? Or was she murdered and placed there to make it look like an accident?
Retired detective Roy Lambert has worked on numerous major crime investigations. He knows the importance of taking the right approach early on.
In police investigations, you only get one chance of investigating and examining a scene. That's the first chance, and you need to get it right first time.
Forensic investigators examined every inch of the crime scene and noticed distinctive fibres on Veena's body. They quickly called in Roger Robson, one of the UK's leading experts in fibre analysis.
It all really revolved around some fibres, and there was a tuft hanging out from the side of her mouth. And she had one hand grasped firmly, and the fibres were sticking out between her fingers. So the inference being that something had either been used to contain her, maybe wrapped over her head, and equally, if she had been murdered, and the body had been put in situ to make it look like an accident, then maybe she'd been wrapped up in something so the body could be moved.
Roger was convinced that if he could figure out the origin of these fibres, it would reveal the events leading to Veena's death.
Every contact leaves a trace, so what we're trying to do is look at items of clothing from the victim. Each fibre's usually had a bit of a journey from the manufacturing stage to where we found it. That can give it a little bit of individuality.
Roger started by running tests, analysing the exact makeup of the fibres he'd been sent.
First steps is the tuft in the mouth, the same as the tuft in the fingers. So what we do is we take the fibres and we mount them under a microscope slide. I'm looking at the morphology, the cross-sectional shape, the colour, and I'll run some tests to look at the chemical composition.
While Roger analysed the fibres, the police were also beginning to suspect foul play, so they began to look into Veena Patel's relationships, including with her business partner, John Court.
Veena Patel and John Court had been not just business partners, but great friends for 3 decades or so. They'd worked together. They were partners in a business called Court & Co. That was based in Leicester, and it was a very successful business. They were both very highly regarded in the legal profession and also by their clients.
But as detectives investigated further, they uncovered another side to John Court.
That veneer of respectability disappeared when it emerged that actually he was living an extraordinary double life. He was somebody that enjoyed a luxurious and lavish lifestyle well beyond his means and well beyond the wage that he was being paid. It also became apparent that he was visiting very expensive hotels in London, very expensive restaurants in London. He funded a penthouse flat in Leicester. He funded 2 flats in West London where he housed girlfriends, where he had a string of escorts.
Police began to look more closely at John Court's finances and those of his and Veena's business. It wasn't long before they found something very revealing.
Where was this money coming from? How could he fund this lifestyle? Well, simply by taking money out of the business, by taking money from clients. £1.1 million he took out of the business. £650,000 he took from client accounts.
Vina voiced her concerns to her husband and began to ask questions that for John Court were awkward to answer.
Veena Patel first became suspicious of Court when he was putting her under pressure to increase her life assurance to £1.5 million. That concern led to a chain of events which really put Court into a corner.
While police followed the money, Roger Robson followed the fibres found on Vina's body.
It was relatively easy to identify the fibres. They were blue polypropylene. However, they were really unusual because they were exceptionally thin. I'd certainly never seen any polypropylene fibres like this before. We didn't really know where these fibres had come from. There might have been an obvious answer that just led us back to Veena Patel's home life. So I have to look for other sources, if only to eliminate them. So the investigative team sent me various samples, both from the working office where Vina went daily. They also did the same thing at Vina's home address, and again, I didn't find any blue polypropylene at all. So the inference is they are something to do with the perpetrator.
The financial evidence proved John Court had a motive for killing Vina. Now, if Roger found a link between him and the blue fibres, that would connect Court to the body as well. But he found nothing.
It raised a few questions when I couldn't find the source of the fibres. You start asking, well, where have they come from then?
But Roger was not going to be able to identify the source of the fibres in his lab. For that, he would need to look further afield.
Most polypropylene fibres are manufactured specifically to go in either rote or they make carpets to be really hard wearing, just like nylon. I could see these rather nice, what we call fisheye extrusion marks along the length of the fibre. The marker at the end of the day is it's just like a fingerprint, really, specific to their brand.
Roger hoped these extrusion marks could lead him to where the fibres were manufactured. There are producers all over the world, but he started his search with a company based in Bradford.
I knew that this little company would have all the answers. They got their technical team together, and pretty much by the end of that first day, they were happy that it wasn't something that they'd produced themselves. But they felt that if we could leave the fibres with them, they knew what some of their competitors would use to mark, and that may help identify where these fibres had actually been originally manufactured.
While Roger waited for answers, the police investigation made a major breakthrough. Foreign DNA found on Vina's hand. It belonged to a friend and sometime lover of John Court, Brian Farrell. He lived 100 miles away in London, so how did his DNA end up on Vina? When police questioned him, he had an explanation.
Brian Farrell's excuse was that he had been at the office. He made no secret of the fact that he had actually been there. He said that he and Court had been having sex in the office shortly before Vina had been killed. And his DNA would have been there and that somehow got onto Vina's body either through John Court or through her desk or something like that. So to him, he said it was no surprise that his DNA was found.
It was clear DNA would not solve this case. Instead, everything was hanging on the mystery fibres, just as Roger got a call from the fibre factory in Bradford.
It took them a couple of weeks, but they were really confident that the source of these particular fibres was from a little factory in India. They had a conversation with the managing director, and sure enough, this guy had been using the very fine polypropylene fibres to make small rugs. They weren't exporting them to the UK. Indeed, they weren't exporting them to Europe, but we did find out that they were exporting them to only one outlet in Jamaica.
Detectives were left asking how a rug manufactured in India and exported to Jamaica could be key to a possible murder in Leicester. It seemed to make no sense until they looked into the travel history of Brian Farrell.
Brian Farrell had visited Jamaica shortly before Veena Patel's murder, and police believe that he had bought that rug, and he had not only brought it back to the UK, but he had used it on that night to wrap Veena Patel's body in it after he had killed her. And that was how this piece of fibre ended up on Veena Patel's body.
It was such an unusual fibre. I felt the only way I was going to get there was to go and knock on the door of industry and speak to the manufacturers. I felt as though I'd done my bit, done a good job.
Police believe that Farrell killed Veena, wrapped her in the rug and moved her to the bottom of the stairs. It explained the fibres and the DNA. Farrell was now the prime suspect. And as detectives dug deeper, they found evidence John Court was also involved. Was Farrell acting as his hitman?
John Court had put a false appointment in Veena Patel's diary to make sure that she was in the office late that night. Later in the evening, John Court's mobile phone had phoned the office, and once he knew that Veena Patel was still there, his mobile phone was in contact with 2 of Brian Farrell's mobile phones to give him the green light to act.
The police now had enough evidence to charge both Brian Farrell and John Court for the murder of Veena Patel. On the 28th of May 2010, the pair were found guilty.
This evidence, when put together, proved beyond any sort of doubt whatsoever that these 2 men were guilty of what the judge described as a premeditated, calculated and ruthless murder.
The case was conclusive, held together by unique blue fibres.
Just a couple of tufts of fibres leads you across the world to India, and then you go all the way back to the other side of the world to Jamaica, and then all the way back to Leicester again. It just shows the powerful inferences that fibre evidence can bring to an investigation.